Okay.
Yeah, totally. I'm going to take clips from this and then I'm going to make like the video and then kind of promote the full interview on your, your channel, like a cross promote kind of
Yeah,
thing.
for sure.
Cool.
Of course.
Cool.
Yeah. Sounds great.
Yeah. I mean, are
Yeah.
you ready to get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Yeah. I'm kind of curious first, like, everyone I've worked with and I collaborate with a lot of guys who are in the porn addiction space. And as I say, it's guys, right? And so like, how does a woman get into like your story and how you started to help men?
Yeah, absolutely. And half of my story is in the vault because half of my story isn't my story. So I tell, and if you know Brene Brown's work, she talks about vaulting, that, if you're a trusted person to somebody, you can hold their stories in a vault. So I tell my half of it, which is my story, but someone that I worked with in my office, I have a private practice also where I offer neurofeedback, brain training, that I worked with for a long time. I was helping them with anxiety and focus and brain fog and lack of motivation, anger, irritability, and I knew this person well. So it's a personal, not just a professional. So anyways, I finally figure out that he was watching a ton of porn. And like at first, I didn't care about porn, honestly, before that. Like I didn't think twice about it either way, but then I'm like, porn. And so then I like to learn everything about everything that I care about. So I started digging in, and as a neuroscientist and a brain health professional, I quickly discovered that not only was it at the root of my friend's problem, but that it probably wasn't going to be easy to eradicate. And, it's a long story, but long story short, I quickly deemed porn consumption the worst thing that we have upon us in terms of what's happening with men and how they're feeling and they're performing. There's less men getting into college and getting through college. Men are not able to do their jobs. It's creating all this mood swing stuff. So partners don't know what's going on. When you dip into the research, women's alcohol consumption's up significantly, even before COVID. Wow. So like, I always call it this, negative ripple effect. So long story short, I tried to help my friend, like without really getting fully educated, sending him to local colleagues in CSATs, in the sex addiction, area. And not only did he not get help, he literally got worse. A lot of it was justified. Like, if you're looking for a professional to tell you porn use is fine for you, you can find a million of them. So, not only did he find those professionals, long story short, he was getting worse and I couldn't let that happen. So I did a lot of research. I became trained. I worked under some of the leading professionals. And so I helped him. Long story short, like literally once I figured this out and I really went to work on it, it was just a few months till he was really a lot better. And of course it's a journey. So then the funny or the ironic thing is, like, it was eating away at me because I literally felt like I knew this secret that the world should know, but I also didn't really want to tell people that I care about porn because, at that time I was working on attention and anxiety. So I made one video and I put it on a new YouTube channel, just one video that literally says nothing and people remind me of it every day. So I put this one video out, how to heal your brain from pornography. And then, like a month or two later, I get a notification that it's been seen, 100,000 times or something. And I'm like, oh my gosh, people are listening to this. And and I really attribute the growth of what I'm doing here. I think everything happens for a reason, but, the growth to those first couple people who really put positive comments on the channel for the first couple of videos, because it really inspired me because of the response to make more. So I quickly made a lot of them. And then I created a program based upon how I had helped my friend.
Yeah. I mean, not the origin point is similar, but because my origin point is my own personal problem with it. Right. But, just like thinking, because not a lot of men obviously talk about this, right? People rather say they killed someone than show their porn history or say they have a problem with it.
100%. I know.
And you make one video, which is on the internet, and it's like, I was like, oh, I dealt with this. I'm going to see what people know about this. And I like went over like myths about like people in the nofap community, like, oh, you get superpowers. And it's like, I use science to show like the true problems with it. And it got a million views in like 6 months. I'm like, wow.
Yeah. No, it's totally amazing. But the problem is, it's amazing, the response. But the unfortunate part is, I mean, think about if those are the people who are responding and watching it, and it's being served to people, because people are like, how did this get served up to me on YouTube?
Sure.
And, in my mind, I'm like, we all know how it got served up to you on YouTube. You might not understand the algorithms, but you know what I mean? So, but the point is that there's so many people in need. Think about what the small percentage is that's finding videos like that. And, now I've talked to thousands of men who are struggling, a few women. People always want to know if this applies to women. Of course, this applies to women. And what the science shows, that actually addiction can hit women harder and be more difficult to come out of. But, right now it's a very minute percentage, and it's mostly men.
Yeah, I know from a little bit of the studies that like obviously men are more visual in our arousal state, and women, I know like lit erotica is like the kind of the female porn for a lot of women. But like, I think this recent studies I was looking at, I think 3 out of 10 women are usually consume pornography on like tube sites and videos. And I think
it's literally going up daily. It's going up daily because it's becoming more socially acceptable. As hypersexuality is, like, literally, you and I could talk about this all day long, but hypersexuality is being highlighted more than ever. So, young women are kind of checking things out, and then it is addictive. So then, they're back for more.
Yeah, and you talk a lot about the neurochemistry of this. And I think for a lot of the people watching this right now, they have a basic understanding. I think dopamine's kind of in the ether. People know what that is. At least most people do. But like, what are some of the other neurotransmitters that get affected by consumption of porn?
Yeah, sure. And so I can talk about that. But what I think is more important, or at least from my standpoint, is I think about the electrical energy that a person uses in their brain. And I talk about that a lot, because then what that does is it changes the cascade of how neurotransmitters are released. So there's a lot of them, but not necessarily totally when it comes to porn. When it comes to healthy neurotransmitter release, I always call it, kind of this perfect cocktail of dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin. There's lots, norepinephrine, there's opioid types of neurotransmitters. But when they're being released in a healthy amount, that makes a person want to go into the world and, do some work, and then get some small rewards, and then work towards a larger reward because of the perfect mix. Also, what that perfect mix of neurochemicals does is it makes people want to have sex with a partner, because not only do they want this hit of pleasure, which comes from dopamine, they also want a hit of happiness and joy, which they get from being with someone, and connection, which is they get the happiness from serotonin, they get the connection from oxytocin. And of course, then there's cortisol, which is the stress neurotransmitter, which is, kind of the polar opposite of dopamine. And they're the major players, dopamine and cortisol. And then how it goes back to electrical energy is when we feel calm and focused and relaxed, our brain is literally using a medium speed in terms of hertz, cycles per second. It's around 10 hertz, 10 to 15 hertz. That's, you feel good, you can think, you're focused, you're on task, you're in the zone. Flow state comes out of that middle range of, you can literally picture it like electrical energy going down a wire. Anxiety or hyperarousal comes out of a brain that's using 35, 40 hertz, very fast electrical energy. So what the very fast electrical energy does, it produces more cortisol, the stress neurotransmitter, and it makes a person feel anxious and uncomfortable. And I call it overdrive more than anxiety, because some people are addicted to the feeling of overdrive, not necessarily like, do they feel anxious? They just go, 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 hurry, hurry. That creates hyperarousal, which then if you do that for a very long time, you dip into hypoarousal. You're using too much slow speed, 5 hertz. And that combination of fast and slow is what porn is perfect for taking the edge off of. And porn creates hypoarousal really quickly. takes the edge right off, and it takes you out of this fast, anxious, overdrive, overwhelmed state, and really quickly puts you into a numbed out, feel good state.
Mm-hmm. And when that consistently happens over time, you see like an increase of these highs and lows constantly, which is kind of like dysregulating the whole system? Is that what you're kind of?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I see people's brains. When I work with people, I can literally see how their brain is using electrical energy. So what happens is, and I'm sure you know this, that people who have a unhealthy pornography habit, generally speaking, most of the time, it's on a cycle. So it cycles in and out of when their system has a lot of dopamine. And there's basically 2 points in that cycle. And we can talk about, I can share it with you in a second if you'd like, but then there's points in the cycle where they're really low in dopamine. So I can see that in the graphs. So when people, when people are working with me, I'll see that their brain is, just for easy terms, anxious, 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 totally numbed out. Then a little bit anxious, 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 totally numbed out. And, when I jump on meetings with people, I'll say, did you relapse last Tuesday? And they'll be like, yeah, how'd you know? And it's because I can see the building of hyperarousal over time, and then how porn takes the edge off that.
So when they reach this high peak of anxieties, when they get like an urge to go watch porn. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a trigger. So we know from the science too, that most sexual urges, even though we perceive them, or people who have a sex addiction or have compulsive hypersexuality, those sexual urges are perceived as sex, feelings for sex. They're actually calls for regulation. They're calls for de-stressing. So a big part of what I try to teach people is that it's fundamental that you learn how to regulate your stress and your boredom in healthy ways. And of course, that's become so distorted when people get sucked into a porn habit. But yeah, so up at the top of the cycle, they're triggered, something stresses them. And then the minute they have the thought, and if you've seen any of my videos, I'm always like, I've got a brilliant idea. Let's go watch some porn. Or if they have a fantasy thought, the minute that thought hits, the dopamine's already dripped. There's already a little dopamine drip. And what science shows is the second that drip happens, it begins to create the cascade, and it's monumentally more difficult for a person to not keep going in the cycle. Yeah. So I always talk about an offensive plan and a defensive plan. The offensive plan is regulate your mood before you're triggered into needing to de-stress. The defensive plan is run, don't walk. The second you have that thought, so that you can break that cascade, which can be difficult in the early days. Yeah. But then, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that offensive defensive plan sounds exactly like I tell guys the reactive and the proactive strategies, right?
Totally. And you have to, that's, I know people want a pill or an easy solution.
Which is part of the problem, because they get the easy solution from porn all the time, the immediate gratification. So that spills over to their nutrition, their fitness, their relations, everything, right?
Absolutely. I had a long discussion with someone during a coaching call, a young person too. Yeah. And I enjoy him so much. He's so sweet. He kept saying that it's the gospel of porn recovery, and that I'm a preacher, because I'm saying you can do this, but it's hard. You have to go just play some basketball right now for 5 minutes, take an action step, go make some food, don't order it, because you're hitting the easy button everywhere. You're ordering food, you're not moving your body. Like, go do something that is a little hard for you, because it will show yourself you can do some hard things,
Yeah, it's really crazy. Like, kind of circling back to the beginning of our conversation about how just the lack of education behind how much porn is influencing a lot of our society, and how this thing pretty much is a drug. And that's kind of what, from your perspective, especially, I'm really curious, because there are some, psychologists and neuroscientists out there that don't want to label this as an addiction. And you look at the majority of what defines an addiction, it's the compulsive nature, doing it despite the consequences. Like, how is it not labeled as an addiction?
Yeah, it will be, but it's already labeled in the ICD-11.
Yeah.
So porn isn't, but that's what I say to people. If you have any ability to connect the dots between research, which a good scientist or healthcare professional, maybe not, but scientists can definitely connect the dots. So ICD-11 has compulsive hypersexuality behavior disorder in it. But, and then if you read other research studies, the number one way that hypersexuality, compulsive hypersexuality disorder manifests is porn consumption, which makes it a compulsive behavior disorder, which compulsive behavior disorders are addictions. So it's just a matter of time. This doesn't surprise me either, because this is how the cigarette industry developed and undeveloped and in over 50 years. It took over 50 years. Everybody was smoking until someone started saying smoking is not good for you. And then not pharmaceutical, that's a different discussion, but then big tobacco came in and they're like, it's fine for you. Look at all this fake science. It's fine for you. It's totally fine. So, we're in the same place there. And eventually people, and, we're already seeing it. Like, if I'm sure the comments on your channel, the comments on my channel, where people will say to me, like, don't listen to this lady. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And other people's comments are, porn's destroying my life. So like for me, I'm trying to go to people and empower them to look at their own behaviors. I'm not trying to take a system or an industry down. I'm just trying to say to people, like, if this is a problem for you, you can do something about it. It might be tricky, but if you get the right support, you've got a whole life left to not have to be sucked back in.
Well, that's the thing about that I always say too. It's like, I'm not attacking the porn industry in general, because you say porn industry in general, like you have stuff from vanilla, amateur, like sexual education to deviant, illegal stuff, right? So it's like, totally. On that end of the spectrum, that's, I guess, I say morally wrong in my opinion, but and like there's people out there that can socially drink and be okay, but for some people, when they consume pornography, they cannot stop, and there's the consequences. So it's just about
and honestly, it's most people. Completely. So like for me, I feel like I totally get what you're saying. Everything exists on a continuum, but from a neuroscience perspective, it's actually the rare person, because most people actually do get sucked into alcohol misuse over time. Like, not necessarily full-blown alcoholism, but alcohol misuse. And we know that. And most people, like, they might not be complete alcoholics, but they might start drinking every day, or, drinking too heavy on the weekends. Many people, it's the rare
depends
person.
On the culture too, right? Because like over in Europe, they have drinks like at every meal, but they don't binge drink, right? They have maybe one or two max.
Yeah. And it's exposure too. So, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. So now what is happening now is young people are being exposed even earlier to pornography. And the reason that it's different than alcohol is that exposure happens at 8 years old is what the average is now. Mm-hmm. So the brain, science shows that at 8 years old, the brain is actually more susceptible to being hooked on to that stimulus as an addiction. And it's the very rare brain that isn't. And so when someone puts on a comment and they say, I've watched porn a few times, but I don't see the appeal, I'm like, I'm so glad for you, because that is not the norm. Because, so many, I'm sure you've heard this too. So many people report, they're like, I didn't even like it when I first saw it, but it just made my brain feel good. So I kept going back for more. And then over time, I liked it.
Yeah. And, there's this, I'm doing a new video right now I took the most recent studies on the onset of age of pornography and how it kind of relates to deviancy and kind of the type of genres of porn you watch. And it's just like any other drug where you need more of that novelty, right? Yeah. And for some people, it's like, okay, first, like, picture alone is enough, when I first started, and then multiple tabs. Now, oh, this is disgusting, but like, oh, it's kind of risky. And like, risk is equated to arousal. And then you get to a point where there's just like complete shame. And so anyone listening right now, it's like, there's some people that say like, oh, this isn't like, it's not the genre porn, it's not that bad, I'm watching. It's like, yeah, we'll give it 5 or 6 more years.
Yeah. Escalation. And I've talked about that a lot lately. I actually just made 2 videos where I was talking about how porn tricks you, because young people probably don't totally get what's happening. Actually, I know they don't. And I know even middle-aged people don't understand kind of the way that this develops without you even seeing it or knowing that it's happening to you. So, first it's like whenever casually consuming, then what happens is going from more frequency, more consistency, longer sessions, and then definitely increases in intensity. And going back to your point, which goes back to what I was saying about how brain speeds work, Anxiety is that fast speed, which does cause excitement and arousal. And we know in the nervous system, it can be difficult for people to parse out excitement and anxiety. So when anxiety and arousal are mixed, it creates, I called it a friction point, but it creates this like even more intense experience for people. So partially that's why people will go to genres that make them feel anxious, because it gives them more of that hit of dopamine, and it's part of the appeal. But in doing so, it creates escalation because it's creating larger amounts of dopamine that are released into the system, making it so that the brain recalibrates and needs more and needs more and needs more.
I'm not sure if you spoke to clients about this, but like some people that I hear them say, it's like, oh, I'm not going to ever go to this like dark place. And I always try to tell them the story through videos or just talking that I worked with sex offenders right out of college, and I never thought I'd work with that population. It's kind of how I got more into it. And I saw that every single one, had a heavy porn addiction. Right. And the first person I was ever going to work with, I was expecting someone to walk in the door with like, this stereotypical, like glasses, fat, like balding, this super attractive, well-dressed guy, very articulate. And he was talking to me and he was like, I started watching at a young age and it just de-escalated to illegal stuff. He got caught and like it ruined his life. He never would have, you would never expect this guy to do that. And it's just like, it happens.
Well, that's why my heart breaks, because like I could see that in someone that I care about and I love, that I could see it, like it just, that's, I always say it grabs hold of your brain and then you can't make sense of the actions that you're doing. I talk to so many people where like when they snap out of it, they're literally sick at the direction that they were moving. And, I've been saying lately, like that old adage where I'm sure you've heard it, where, a fish is about to jump into a fishbowl and he's like to the other fish that's in there, hey, how's the water? And the fish goes, what's water? So like, you can't even see it when you're in it. And that is, to me, the most devastating part. And then it's really difficult to snap yourself out of it. And so that's why I'm trying to help people on a more global scale, snap them out of it by going, just look at this thing for what it is. It's not what you are looking for. You're looking for intimacy. You're looking for connection. That's scarier. Your brain is literally hijacked by this thing. The only way to free yourself is to take these steps that are going to be a little tricky, but they're going to be worth it.
Yeah. I kind of want to like segue into what you think the future of this will look like in regards to, virtual reality, AI, like OnlyFans, like all these different things. Is it going to help some men who can't feel like they can't meet that need, or you think it's just going to be a downward decline for a lot of men?
Going to be a downward decline. There's no way.
I was going to play devil's advocate a little bit, but I'm not going to.
No, and honestly, I've explored this. I've explored a lot of things that I never thought I would explore because of, being in this field now. But like, I've explored relationships, like, maybe marriage isn't the right thing for most people. And, we can talk about that. I am married. I have 5 kids. I have 6 kids. Technically I have a stepson. Wow. So like, that's important to me. And I still think it's important for most people, at least partnership. But, I've explored things like that. And I've tried to like take the thread all the way down, because I feel for people who don't have partners. And I'm sure for you, it's difficult to help those people in a really healthy way.
They don't want help, right? They're the ones saying that, like, and even in the comments,
I work with really nice people. They're like, I just don't have a partner. I'm like, you literally never will until you leave the screen behind, because it is distorting your entire reality. It's creating this like illusion of what a person is that you can get or you will get. And like,
it objectifies the woman. Like, you can't connect with them on a human level. Not only does it objectify, but it creates this like paradox where it's like, I deserve immediate sex from these women, but I'm not good enough to talk to them.
Definitely. It creates, we know self-esteem's going through the, tanking in men. There's studies that show even men who use Tinder, not even men who use porn. There's a study out on Tinder that it is crushing men's self-esteem, making it even harder to try to find a partner.
And they want to blame women for that, but it's not the woman. It's the platform, because women are able to be super selective at a high degree. They're like, look, they only,
but there's no healthy women on Tinder. There's just not, there's not. And so like, and also trying to teach people this. It's really hard because there's so many working parts that if you're looking for a healthy woman, because people will say women are comments, women are so much work. They just try to control you. They want your money. They never want to have sex. I'm like, not healthy women. Healthy women feel really good on the inside. They go into the world. They take charge of the thing. They're glad to be by you. They want to have a lot of sex with you. They laugh with you. You can tell them their stuff and you're going to throw it back at you. That's what a healthy partnership
It's a
is.
self-fulfilling prophecy, but like I've made so many videos on this, and it's just like you try to show someone the truth behind it, but if they're in the veil of like their own reality, they're not going to see it, right?
Yep. And I love that. I use that term too, the veil. Like a veil can be lifted, like it's pretty easy once you commit to it, like
it's a protection mechanism, right? Like if I say to you, women only want a top 1% guy and they're all selfish and greedy, I don't have to go get rejected and approach them, right?
Yep. But at the same time, like, this goes back to what the inherent underlying problem is. They're literally addicted to it. So they're just making excuses for a thing they can't leave behind. So even when people make the decision, I'm leaving this thing behind, then they realize it's just not that easy. That's when the excuses come in. That's where justification. So sometimes that's at an unconscious level that a person doesn't even realize, but they're justifying it to themselves.
No, it's crazy. I'm not sure if I worked with like a lot of alcoholics and drug addicts for a while as well. And the amount of like how powerful this is, like I can't prove this, but on an unconscious level, a lot of the clients would hurt themselves so they can, I had my back pain. Now I need to go get opiates again.
Definitely.
And it's like unconscious to them, it's the process is happening with pornography for sure.
It is. And that's, that's why, like, going back to the question of where is this going? It's going to go in a bunch of terrible directions. And I mean, we already see it on TV. We see it in, I pick up Men's Health magazine. We get Men's Health magazine. My husband does. There's a whole 2-page spread on like the future of self-pleasure. And I'm like, come on, Men's Health. Like, let's get with the curve here that, this is what men want to hear, but like, can't you see this can't be good to try to sell people these products to just continue to have sex by themselves? Like, that's not good for any man. Like, sex is evolutionarily, it's supposed to be with another person, but beyond that, people want to be with another person. It's just harder and scarier, and there's fear of rejection, but underneath it all, they actually want it. So life is way too short to sit around with a substitute that's damaging your brain and in your room by yourself on your phone or computer. It's time to literally break free of those shackles and do the difficult things, step into the world and claim it for yourself.
It's also hard to, start your own business, become the hero of your life. But like, that's why people escape the video games as well, right? It's a lot easier, and every time you fail, just press a button, you're back to the beginning again where you started.
Definitely. And, I was thinking about this too, because, there's, I'm sure, you might talk about it, I don't know, where people exist on continuums, the whole alpha male kind of thing.
Oh my God, don't get me started on that.
And we don't have to go there, but the whole point is that we all have an alpha version in us, and we all have a sigma or beta version or whatever, so when you do the difficult things, you take action steps to become your own alpha version. And if everybody was working at their alpha versions, and yes, those are all different, and they should be, because the world would be boring with everybody's alpha being the exact same. But if we were all in that space, everybody would be healthy. And then everybody would be rocking out their best life. People would be having tons of sex with each other, and they'd be out in the world.
I know. Someone said the other day, they were like, the alpha, beta, sigma, all that stuff is like astrology for men. I was just cracking up.
It is. And I think it's terrible because it is putting labels on people. Like, I'm not a fan of labels.
It's limiting you to this like category, which you're not, and
to this concept. And another part of, being sucked into porn is that it is self-limiting. And then when someone tells you like, this is a self-limiting characteristic or whatever, it's like, no, it's a behavior and it's an addiction. So when you think of it as it's not a choice, it is an addiction, then, time to break free from it.
If I am going to play devil's advocate in one area, I do want to, I do want to ask you about.
I love a good devil's advocate.
Yeah. I have a lot of clients that come to me and ask me, well, what about just masturbation with no pornography? Like, is that okay? And I know what I tell them, but like, what would I kind of watched one of your videos on this, but I'm kind of curious what your thoughts on are.
Yeah. And honestly, I think I only made one or two, but I talked to people about it all day long, but I didn't want to make a video for this very reason, because of what my answer is that, of course, if you have healthy sexuality, then keep masturbation in, because why not? But the key there is healthy sexuality. If you struggle with hypersexuality, it's just not feasible at the beginning, and it may not be feasible for a long time or ever, because the essence of it is you're going back to sex to de-stress your nervous system. And when you were very young, you learned the way to feel good is to just hit an easy button, and masturbation's easier than being with another person, having to worry about, all the things that come with being
or
with
deal
a
with
partner.
the things stressing you out, right?
Totally. Or deal with anything you're stressing her out. So like, I think for healthy people, then yeah, masturbation's fine. But I think most people, and I know anybody who has struggled with pornography for a long time, it will be a slippery slope back in the wrong direction, most likely.
Yeah. I like to use Dr. Gabor Mate's kind of definition of addiction. And I like the simplest explanations tend to be the right ones, in my opinion. He says, look, I tell guys this: if it's compulsive, which means you catch yourself just doing it without even like on autopilot, or you're doing it, there's consequence to it, where you're like cutting into a time, like you're late for something and you're doing it multiple times a day. Yeah, it's a problem, right? But
yeah. And if you're using it, because I try to teach men to think about, when do you masturbate and why? When and why is more important than when. But like, okay, so if you masturbate every Monday morning, why? It's because your brain's going, I've got a whole day, the first day of this week that I have to go into. And then what happens, and I don't know if you've heard me talk about this, or you may know, is that when you go into the screen, when you use pornography, you get all this dopamine. So then when you go into the world, you've actually trained your brain. Not only is there less dopamine, there's none. There's cortisol in the world. That's why it creates all this stress and anxiety. So now you're looking at your Monday, and there's nothing there for you but stress, but it's caused by going into the screen. So then you're like, if I'm going to get through this Monday, I need a hit of dopamine right now to ride this Monday out. And so I encourage people to look at your cycle. What are you doing? And everybody knows what their cycle is. Like most people do. They'll be like, oh my gosh, I masturbate every morning. I can't even get out of bed unless I masturbate. So many people, I mean, this, have to masturbate to go to sleep. They've taught their brains. They've taught their brains what we do to fall asleep. It's just like alcoholics. It's just like alcoholics who drink 3, 4, 5 drinks to be able to sleep. And if you just think about logically, it's because of hyper arousal. Their brains are off the chain. So they need something to bring it down to sleep. So it's
another perspective on that is like, you're finally going to put your head on the pillow. Like you can't escape your own thoughts anymore. Right. And so it's like, yeah, you want that emotional anesthetic to kind of like get you away. But what are your thoughts? I haven't watched any of your videos. Like I've done a lot. If you've seen some of my videos, I actually did like an experiment measuring my testosterone with semen retention. And I've done a lot. I haven't seen it, but I'm a mixed bag with this. So I'm kind of curious what your thoughts on semen retention are, because there's a lot of myth out there about it and what you think about it.
I don't love it. And I don't love it because I think people's goals should be healthy sexuality. And I think it's fine for a time. I think it's good for a time, actually. But in the long run, people do want partners. So, like I talk to people who are with their partners, but they're retaining semen. Like that's not healthy sexuality. Like, you know what I mean? If you're trying to rebuild your relationship and it's on the rocks because of, hypersexuality and poor choices when it comes to sex, and now you're finally repairing your relationship, but you're going to retain your semen in an interaction, like that's not, what we're going for. I do think it's good for a dopamine detox at the beginning of this journey. It can be really good too, from a brain perspective. But again, I think that is easier than trying to create healthy sexuality. It's easier to go, sex is difficult for me to figure out. I'm just going no sex. I'm going. So they go from
a lot of guys, like they'll do a pendulum swing, right? They'll go from one end of the spectrum like to the other, and since they love all the benefits they're getting from a guy, like knowing, I can speak to this. after we do that, like we have this kind of like lethargy, and you can know that from studies, obviously, and personal accounts with your clients. And I think guys become addicted to that, like constant, just like, all right, I'm always like, I'm masculine. I feel it on edge, you know?
Yeah, but you can get that. That's the edgy piece. You can get that with healthy sexuality, but it's harder to achieve. And I have a client who wasn't like measuring his testosterone because of, he was doing it for workout reasons and health reasons, but not for, because of porn. But beautifully, he had his testosterone, he had his blood test taken right before he started working with me. And then actually it was a pretty short time in the grand scheme of things, but it was, the 90-day, 3-month mark. He had it measured again, and his testosterone was way up, but he was with a partner. So like you can get those benefits. It just is, it's tricky to figure out, but I think it's good to do it for a little while because of that kind of swinging to the extreme, because I know from my experience, and I don't know if you have this experience, that many people, it's difficult to come halfway back. Like they're so stuck over on this side where they're just going to sex all the time. And when you ask them to come halfway back, they don't know how to. And especially for people who, middle-aged people, I hate to keep classifying it, but, middle-aged people have had this problem for 40 years. So if for 40 years, your brain's gone to sex for de-stressing, and now you're telling it to go to sex for connection, it's like, I don't know how to do that. So then when you swing it in the other direction and you're like, don't go to sex until the brain unwires, rewires in the healthy mode, then you can bring it back to the middle. So I do think it has utility for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the main reason why a lot of guys do it is like they think that it just like it makes their testosterone increase a lot, because there's a couple studies. I even said there's a couple studies that I showed, but I know that there's some other scientific literature also saying that if you hold it too long, it could increase prostate cancer.
Yeah, and
I don't know about that one. I haven't read that one personally, but I've heard.
No, and actually, I'm interviewing a urologist on my podcast pretty soon to have that discussion, because I mean, just think about it logically. Like, yes, maybe if you retain forever, you'll have more prostate issues, but it's going to be the people who have the propensity for that in the first place. But that's not the people who are saying it. It's the people who want to masturbate every day so they can ward off prostate cancer, which is ridiculous, honestly. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to masturbate.
The body's a self-regulatory system. So like if it does get to too much, you'll have like nocturnal emission, and it'll kind of self-regulate.
It's completely self-regulatory. That's exactly right. And just going back to your thought about, like kind of that pendulum swinging from hypersexuality over into semen retention, is that, that also can really be very appealing, for the increase in testosterone. But this is what I want people to know. When you stop consuming porn, your testosterone goes up, because you're depleting it through the constant hypersexuality in your brain. Testosterone is a hormone which is connected to neurotransmitter release, which is connected to the electrical energy in your brain. So it's not that you have low testosterone and you need to swing so far as semen retention. It's you have to stop the hypersexuality, and your testosterone is going to come back online to the healthy levels, not to the jacked up levels that make you feel on edge.
And going back to what we were saying about how like someone who's in that addiction space, like if they're in the addict brain, they have these unconscious motivations. I know for a lot of guys that talk to me, once they kind of are quitting porn for 30, 60, 90 days, they ask me, should I talk to girls? Like, I don't know. I think them saying, I want to practice semen retention is almost another way of like preventing them talking to a girl and getting rejected and all that.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I mean by that. It's so much easier to go, I'm going to get all this sex over here from porn and whatever else sexual acting out, and now I'm just going to have none. But that's when, and it goes back to what I first said, healthy brain performance is in the middle. So you can't stay over there forever, and you shouldn't even want to. You should want to bring it back so that you can feel calm and focused, more confident, but then you might have to practice those skills, and you might get rejected, but rejection's never killed anybody. And you have to become stronger.
Tell that to their reptilian brain, because that's what they're telling themselves, right? In their emotions.
I know.
A good connection with this, like that makes sense, like an analogy, is like, imagine if someone's eating junk food all the time, and they're like, they got fat, and they're like, I'm going to fast now. And they're like, I'm just going to fast all the time now. And it's like, that's not good for you. You can still eat healthy food, right? So there is a healthy sexuality. There's a healthy medium in between. And I think of some guys listening, they don't really understand that there is a healthy medium. Like there's healthy sexuality, like hooking up with a girl that you're, dating and love with, whatever, once a week, like twice a week, whatever it is. It's
absolutely.
fine.
And when it comes to meeting women too, like what I want for people in the end is to, going back to what I already touched upon, is that find a healthy woman, like have discernment. Don't go out there and
No, but
just
healthy women don't exist, Dr.
They do. And they might be rarer and it's harder to find them. But what a cool thing is too, is like, okay, let's say you like someone. If you're on the journey to becoming a healthier version of yourself, you can find someone who, if you're young and you don't have a partner, and women are more hypersexual than ever. But so if you go out there and you're in a transformational mindset, you can find someone who's in a transformational mindset with you, who's on the road to becoming, that continuum towards their alpha self. And think about how fun that is, right? What an awesome life where you're moving through it with someone who's constantly trying to be the best version of themselves too.
Yeah. We talked a lot about the importance of, you say the offense and defense with the stress reduction and the anxiety. I know that another main cause of a lot of people's inability to overcome this is the shame, right? And some, again, playing devil's advocate, some people would say, well, the shame is completely influenced by cultural factors, by religious factors. And I can make an argument otherwise, but what do you think, what role does shame play in pornography use, and how do men overcome that?
Sure. So we know shame is at the foundation of compulsive hypersexuality. We know that science is backing that up. And you're totally right. We're programmed by our culture. So it can be religious, but it also is, I always talk about it as mother, father, teacher, preacher. So it's your culture, your community, somebody else programmed you. And so we know that we're programmed from generations before, and most of us have not been programmed in the healthiest way. So trauma, family dysfunction is at the core of this, which creates the shame and keeps it perpetuating. Every single family has family dysfunction. Find me the functional family and I'll give you $1 million, because it's really tricky to find. And I know this because I am trying to raise 6 functional children, and my husband, who's not very happy with me right now, he's not happy with me because I had a discussion with him, which it doesn't matter at all. But at the root of it is, we're going away this weekend and all of our kids were planning on coming with us. But then now 2 of them have things they want to do. And I'm like, let's let them do it. And he's like, we have a family trip planned. They're going. And I'm like, my son's 17 and a half. I go, like, literally in 3 months, he can just go, F you, I'm not coming. I'm an adult. I said, so like, shouldn't we allow him choice in this? But so it's pretty wild. And I can feel it on my husband. He's thinking about this because we're programmed. When your parents plan a family trip, you go, there is no choice. But for me, I'm like, you know what? A 17 and a half-year-old maybe should have some choice in that if something bigger came up, and it's homecoming weekend. So like, so I'm like, let's rethink this. Let's be different parents than we've been all along. But most parents don't do that. Most parents go, family trips are for families and they're going, damn it, get in the car. And, and I'm like, and he's like, why are you talking like this? And I'm like, I don't know what's right or wrong, but I do think there's some merit. So what I'm doing is I'm unraveling those multi-generational ties that are programming. So I've been doing that. I proudly say that I'm the black sheep in my family because I deprogrammed myself and created a lot of problems for me. Then I reprogrammed myself and I'm still doing it. And so when I coach people, what I encourage them, and I joke, if you ever hear me talk, I'm like, oh, the students become the master, because I'll get in a meeting with someone and they'll go, what do you think I should do with this? And then I'll say, what do you think? And they'll go, I think I should do this. But that happens over time of working together, where first I'll get a panicky email and because they can't see their own patterns.
Right.
So my point about that is the shame comes from, and actually my son texted me this. He's like, I don't want dad to be mad at me about my choice. How awesome is that? How adult thinking is that? And why should he be mad at an almost adult for his choice. He shouldn't. So there's going to need to be some growth there, which, my job is to help him grow, and his job is to help me grow in the moments I need it. And thankfully, we've created a relationship where we do that. And so, the reason I tell that story, which isn't that exciting, is because like I had to approach him, which creates conflict between me and him. And we have an awesome relationship. But when I think, what, maybe this needs to be thought about more. And he'll be like, why are you arguing with me? I'm like, I'm not, I just want to discuss it. And then we will eventually, once he kind of sees the pattern, and then we'll make a choice. But, that unravels the shame. If I make him go and then my son's a nightmare and the whole trip's awful, and now there's all these family problems, he'll have shame thinking he did us wrong. Mm-hmm. So when you unravel that, religion does it on accident. And I don't have the answer. And I know I'm probably going to frustrate some people, but when it comes to religion, many religions need to be jumped into the new millennium with healthy sexuality considered, because so many people who are devoutly religious think it's fine to watch porn. They don't think it's fine to have relations before they're married, but porn doesn't fit into that category. And I'm sure you've seen it. It's all over the internet, different things that people are doing that fit into a different box than actually having sexual relations. But they're so unhealthy, those other things.
It's so distorted, the mental gymnastics that people can play around with that. I mean, we can go into depth about different religions and what they do, but
it's wild. Like I have to teach 5 teenagers right now how to go from being kids to being healthy sexual adults. And I know how to do it in theory, but in actuality as a mom, and I'm doing a great job so far, but Good. It's completely different than what my parents did. You know what I mean? Like literally polar opposite. Yeah. But, and I don't know if I'm doing it 100% right, because there is no such thing, but I'm trying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I'm trying. So like, again, I have to undo my programming, take the shame out of sex for my kids, but teach them how to have healthy sexuality at too young of ages, because that's when they're interested in it. But trying to teach them to grow within that, that's wild stuff for a parent. And people say to me all the time, like, why did my parent do this? I'm like, they just can't handle it. They don't have the emotional maturity. And you mentioned, laying down at night, putting your head on the pillow and having to sit there with your own emotions, that's difficult. But when you grow your emotional maturity up, you can literally lay your head on the pillow and there'll be a blank space there, because you're trying your best and you feel okay as your authentic self.
Blaise Pascal, this is one of the quotes I actually remember. I'm not going to get it verbatim. I might. He said that all of humanity's problems will be solved if man can sit in a room by himself for an hour quietly alone.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's why meditation is so important, to create time and space. And especially if you keep going into, dopamine baths to numb your brain out, to make it so you can't think well, you don't ever get the opportunity. And I'm sure you have an aspect of this when you work with people, but a big aspect of my program when I work with people is using technology to create the empty space in their minds by optimizing their electrical energy brain pattern, so that they can have some more of those like windows to open up to be able to actually see how they think and feel. And then of course I help them to be able to sense those things and to count on those things more, bringing them back out of that space where they just want all those thoughts to go away, to realize like, some of them, we already talked about this, some of them are uncomfortable. And I tell people, when you feel stressed, just move towards it. Go do one thing. You owe $50,000 to the government, mail them $1, it's approach instead of disengagement. And, and it just shows yourself, I'm the person who can engage. And that's what I did to myself today when, I'm not sure what to do about this vacation thing, but I approached instead of not. And then, I'm the person who approaches when things need to be approached.
Well said. Is there anything else that you kind of wanted to discuss or ask me or talk about that we haven't so far? We've covered a lot of topics, I feel like.
Yeah, we haven't. No, we've jumped around a lot. I don't think so off the top of my head.
Cool.
But I think it's a cool collaboration. It sounds like, us talking is cool, because it sounds like we're on the same page. And, there's so many people out there, being new in this space, I have no intent on, being a competitor. I know one thing I wanted to share where you were saying, how is this impacting young people? And I don't know if you know that I've created a nonprofit organization which is in the work still. It's all, how things go, they get delayed, but that's okay. And the full intent of it, and I'm starting to work with a couple other people, get them on, their minds thinking about the project too. The full intent is to create a digital program that's cool and short that is into all sex ed classes. And starting in the United States, sex ed's the worst. My son's girlfriend, I talked to her and I'm like, what do they teach in sex ed? She's like, how to put a condom on a banana. I'm like, great, we'll have a lot of safe bananas out there, so kids need to know that, this thing feels really good in their brain, but over time, this is really bad for you. Because I think if there was more awareness, we could bring back this negative cascade it's floodgates right now and nobody's talking about it. Like, it's impacting so many people and nobody will talk about it.
I know.
And a program
there's not enough people out there that are discussing this. I mean,
not at all, and not doing it well. Like, no sex ed teachers. Sex ed teachers are health teachers or just regular teachers who have to talk about sex, don't know how to do it, don't want to do it. And they're definitely not talking about porn. So a really cool digital program that shows some graphics and has some facts. That's what I want to get into schools first and foremost, then in youth organizations, in churches, because I want churches to know, because church leaders don't even know that porn's bad. So some of them are okay with the fact that, people are using porn as long as they're not actually having sex with someone. And that's backwards thinking. So many people go to their clergy or their religious leaders when they figure out they have a problem and they're not being given the right answers. And then going back to my origin story of sorts is that psychologists don't know this. I mean, I was floored when that happened where, my friend came back and they're like, this psychologist said it's okay. This is a true story. One said that it's okay to watch porn. Then they went to somebody else who told them they couldn't be helped. They were lost cause. I'm like, this can't be true that you're lost cause.
I can't even believe that. Like, someone would say that.
Lost cause. Like, I'm like, this can't be true. Like, one person thinks it's fine and the other person thinks you're the proverbial lost cause. There has to be a way to figure this out.
Yeah, thank God there's, YouTube. The one positive thing about the internet, about like people can search for answers, because they're out there obviously like us. So
absolutely. So that is really, really cool. Definitely. So
that's really cool that you're doing that. I definitely want to hear more about that, as you set that up.
It's super important because I was reading a book where they were talking about, and I was inspired before this, but kind of simultaneously where, talking about helping people with a problem is a noble cause, but going upstream and cutting it off is kind of even better. So I'm like, I intend on doing this, but I have to go upstream. How do I go upstream on this thing? And I'm not going to the porn industries. I have zero interest there, but I can go to kids and maybe, break this generationally, teach kids about their patterns, help them see it. Like I teach my kids what our patterns look like, and I challenge myself. So it's pretty cool to, have kids who kindly challenge your thought system. How awesome is that? And, that's what I want kids to be able to do, is challenge people's thought systems, figure out what their thoughts are, and follow that in a healthy way.
Fantastic. I think that's a perfect way to wrap things up.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah. Thanks for spending time with me. Really cool.
Yeah, I really appreciate the conversation. I will send me that via email, the file, and I will definitely let you know when I'm going to post the video, so you can definitely share it to your audience as well. And absolutely. Yeah, really thank you for everything, and hopefully we can reach out again in the future and have another conversation.
Definitely. Absolutely. Sounds great. Okay. Well, thanks for your time. I'll talk to you soon.